Sunday dinner at my son Michael's house seemed perfect, until Charlotte, my daughter-in-law of 3 years, slipped me a folded napkin. Her trembling hand pressed it into mine beneath the table, while my son carved the roast. I unfolded it carefully, reading her desperate scrawl, "Dad, pretend you're sick. Leave immediately." Charlotte's terrified eyes met mine for just a second, before she turned away. My stomach lurched. What could possibly make this sweet woman who'd never shown me anything but kindness write such a message? The weight of that napkin in my hand felt heavier than the concrete blocks I used to haul back when I built my construction company from nothing. Charlotte's message burned against my palm as I watched my son Michael serve the pot roast with his usual Sunday enthusiasm. Everything appeared normal on the surface. My grandchildren, 8-year-old Tyler and 6-year-old Sophia, chattered about their upcoming school play, while their mother, my daughter Jennifer, helped set out the green beans. Her husband Robert poured wine for the adults, making his typical jokes about his golf handicap. But Charlotte's hands shook as she passed the mashed potatoes, and I noticed something I'd missed before. Her usual warm smile never quite reached her eyes, and she kept glancing toward the dining room entrance, like she expected someone to burst through at any moment. "Dad, you're not eating much," Michael observed, gesturing at my barely touched plate with his serving fork. "Charlotte made your favorite roast recipe." I forced myself to take a bite, though the meat tasted like sawdust in my mouth. My mind raced through possibilities. Was someone threatening my family? Had Charlotte discovered something dangerous? The rational part of my brain, the part that had built a successful business through 35 years of careful decisions, told me to demand answers right there at the table. But the look in Charlotte's eyes when she'd handed me that napkin stopped me cold. That wasn't just fear. It was terror mixed with desperate hope that I would trust her. "Actually, son, I'm not feeling too well," I said, setting down my fork with deliberate slowness. My hand moved to my chest, rubbing the area over my heart. "Been having some discomfort since this afternoon." The reaction was immediate. Michael dropped his serving spoon, sending gravy splattering across the white tablecloth. "Dad, is it your heart? Should I call 911? No. I waved him off, standing slowly from my chair. "It's probably just indigestion. You know how Dr. Peterson keeps telling me to watch my red meat intake. I think I'll head home and rest." "That's ridiculous," Michael said, already reaching for his phone. "If you're having chest pains, we need to get you to the emergency room. I'll drive you myself." "Michael, please," Charlotte interjected, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "Your father knows his own body. If he says he just needs rest, we should respect that. The emergency room on a Sunday evening would be packed anyway. He'd be sitting there for hours, just to be told to take some antacid." I watched my son's face carefully. A flash of something crossed his features so quick I almost missed it. Annoyance, frustration, something darker. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by his usual expression of filial concern. "Dad's right," Jennifer added, always the peacemaker. "Remember last year when Robert thought he was having a heart attack, and it turned out to be bad sushi, 6 hours in the ER for nothing?" Robert nodded emphatically, apparently happy to have his embarrassing incident serve a purpose. "Worst night of my life. Well, second worst after that audit in 2018. Tyler and Sophia had gone quiet, watching the adults with the intense focus children develop when they sense tension they don't understand. Charlotte moved around the table to help me with my jacket, and as she adjusted my collar, she whispered so softly, only I could hear, "Black SUV. 2 houses down. Don't go home." My blood chilled, but I kept my movements casual, patting her shoulder in what would appear to be a grateful gesture. "Thank you for understanding, dear. Dinner was lovely as always. I'm sorry to cut it short. Let me at least wrap up some food for you," Charlotte offered, already moving toward the kitchen. "You can heat it up when you're feeling better." "I'll walk you to your car," Michael said, and there was something in his tone that brooked no argument. As we stepped out into the cool evening air, I noticed he kept glancing up and down the street, looking for something, or making sure something was still there. "You sure you're okay to drive?" he asked, as I climbed into my Ford pickup, the same truck I'd driven since selling the company 5 years ago. Some things a man doesn't change, even when he can afford luxury. "I'm fine, son. Just need some rest." I started the engine, watching him in my rearview mirror as I pulled away. He stood in the driveway longer than necessary, phone already at his ear, before I'd reached the corner. 2 houses down, just as Charlotte had warned, sat a black Chevrolet Suburban with tinted windows. The engine was running, exhaust visible in the cooling air. As I passed, the headlights flicked on, and the vehicle pulled out behind me, maintaining a careful 3-car distance. My chest tightened, and this time it had nothing to do with acting. 65 years of life, 35 running a construction business that dealt with everyone from day laborers to city officials, and I'd developed instincts about when something was wrong. Right now, every alarm bell in my head was screaming. Instead of taking my usual route home, I turned toward downtown, weaving through side streets I'd memorized during my decades of building in this city. The Suburban followed, professional and patient. When I stopped at a red light, it held back, never getting close enough for me to see the driver through those dark windows. The parking garage attached to the Riverside Mall offered the perfect solution. I pulled in, took my ticket, and wound my way up to the 3rd level. The Suburban followed. But parking garages have one advantage: multiple exits. I parked near the stairwell, grabbed the emergency go bag I kept behind my seat, a habit from my construction days, and took the stairs down to the 2nd level, where I'd spotted another exit. 5 minutes later, I emerged on foot from the Cedar Street entrance, while my pursuer presumably waited near my truck 3 blocks away. I hailed a cab, something I hadn't done in years, and gave the driver an address across town from my home. During the ride, I tried Charlotte's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. Michael's too, though that didn't surprise me. If my son was involved in whatever this was, he wouldn't answer while dealing with whoever was in that Suburban. The cab dropped me at a strip mall where I knew the security cameras had been broken for months. From there, I walked 6 blocks to a coffee shop, ordered a cup I didn't want, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. Charlotte had known about the tale. She'd risked warning me, which meant she wasn't part of whatever Michael was involved in. Or she was playing a deeper game than I could fathom. But I'd seen the fear in her eyes. That hadn't been acting. In 35 years of business, I'd sat across from enough liars, cheats, and con artists to know the difference between performed emotion and the real thing. Charlotte had been genuinely terrified. The coffee grew cold as I sat there thinking. My son, my Michael, who I'd raised alone after his mother died when he was 12, who'd worked summers at my construction sites to learn the value of honest labor, who'd earned his business degree while helping me manage projects. Something had gone wrong with him. The question was what, and more importantly, why was Charlotte trying to protect me from it? A memory surfaced, sharp and unwelcome. 3 weeks ago, Michael had asked detailed questions about my retirement accounts, about the properties I still owned, about the specifics of my will. I'd thought he was being a concerned son, making sure his aging father had his affairs in order. But what if it had been something else entirely? The coffee shop's door chimed, and I glanced up to see a familiar figure entering. Not someone from the Suburban, but Harold Martinez, who'd run the city's building permits office for 20 years before retiring last year. He looked terrible thin, and haunted nothing like the robust man who'd once tried to shake me down for bribes before learning I didn't play that game. He didn't notice me ordering his coffee with shaking hands. I remembered hearing he'd been committed to a psychiatric facility 6 months ago, something about early onset dementia. But the man in front of me didn't look demented. He looked scared. I made a decision then, one that would change everything. Instead of going home, instead of confronting Michael, I was going to find out what my daughter-in-law was trying to protect me from. And I was going to do it carefully, methodically, the same way I'd built my business. Because if there's one thing 35 years in construction teaches you, it's that when the foundation starts cracking, You'd better figure out why before the whole structure comes down on your head. The black Suburban was probably still waiting at the mall. Let them wait. Logan Mitchell hadn't survived this long by walking into traps, even ones that might have been set by his own son. The smart thing would have been to stay away from Michael's house, to hire a private investigator to approach this, like the careful businessman I'd always been. But sometimes, a father's need to know overrides good sense. That's how I found myself parked 3 streets over from my son's Colonial at 11:45 that night, dressed in dark clothes I hadn't worn since my last midnight concrete pour years ago. The neighborhood slept peacefully, porch lights creating pools of safety that I avoided as I made my way through backyards I knew from years of Sunday dinners and birthday parties. The Hendersons' dog, a beagle named Max, whined softly as I passed, but didn't bark. He remembered me from all those times I'd snuck him table scraps against his owner's wishes. Michael's house blazed with light despite the late hour. Through the kitchen window, I could see movement shadows passing back and forth. Multiple people, far more than just Michael and Charlotte. My construction instincts kicked in, evaluating angles and approaches. The spare key Michael had given me for emergencies rested in my pocket, but the front or back doors were too exposed. The basement window, however, offered possibilities. It led into Michael's workshop, a space he rarely used despite my efforts to teach him woodworking. The latch had been broken for 2 years, something he'd been meaning to fix. I'd offered to repair it myself last Christmas, but he'd waved me off, saying it was on his list. The window opened silently, and I lowered myself through, grateful for all those years of physical labor that had kept me limber despite my age. The workshop smelled of dust and abandoned projects, a half-finished bookshelf gathering cobwebs in the corner. I made my way to the stairs, each step calculated to avoid the creaks I'd memorized during my grandchildren's hide-and-seek games. Voices drifted down from the living room, clear enough to make out words. I recognized Michael's laugh, but it sounded different, harder than the boy I'd raised. Other voices joined in, unfamiliar, except for one that made my blood run cold. Richard Blackstone. I'd recognize that oily tone anywhere, even after 15 years. The door to the basement opened onto a hallway that led to both the kitchen and the living room. I crept forward until I could peer around the corner. What I saw made me reach for my phone, switching it to record mode. My living room had been transformed into some kind of business meeting. 8 men sat around, drinks in hand, with documents spread across the coffee table Charlotte had picked out for her first anniversary gift to Michael. And there, in the center, sat Richard Blackstone, older and heavier, but still radiating the same corrupt energy that had made him the cancer of our city's government, until I'd helped put him behind bars. The timeline is critical, Blackstone was saying, pointing at papers I couldn't quite make out. We need the properties transferred before the end of the quarter. The overseas buyers won't wait forever. I told you it's handled, Michael replied, and hearing him speak to this criminal like a partner made something inside me break a little. Dad trusts me completely. He's already signed over power of attorney for his investment accounts. The properties are just a formality at this point. I gripped my phone tighter, making sure it captured every word. When had I signed power of attorney? I'd reviewed some documents last month when Michael said he was helping modernize my portfolio, but I'd read every line. There had been nothing about power of attorney. What about the construction company assets? Another man asked. I recognized him as Thomas Chen, the doctor Michael had introduced as his best friend from college. The dissolved corporation still has valuable contracts and licenses. Those are trickier, Michael admitted. Dad was smart about how he structured the dissolution, but once he's declared incompetent, we can petition the court to access everything as his legal guardian. Declared incompetent. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. My own son was planning to have me declared mentally unfit. The room seemed to spin, and I had to grip the doorframe to steady myself. Speaking of which, Dr. Chen continued, I've already had preliminary discussions with Riverside Psychiatric. They're very accommodating when it comes to elderly patients showing signs of dementia. A few documented episodes, Some concerning behavior patterns and the commitment papers practically write themselves. Just make sure it's airtight, Blackstone warned. Logan Mitchell put me away for 5 years with his testimony. I want him drooling in a locked ward while we dismantle everything he built. It's poetic justice. Charlotte entered from the kitchen carrying a tray of fresh drinks. Even from my hiding spot, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the forced smile that looked more like a grimace. "Gentlemen, perhaps we should table this discussion for the evening," she suggested, her voice carefully neutral. "It's getting late, and the neighbors—" "The neighbors are asleep," Michael cut her off sharply. "And we're not done here. Sit down, Charlotte." She sat, and I saw her hands clench in her lap. One of the men, younger than the rest, with the hungry look of an ambitious prosecutor, leaned forward. "We need to discuss the accident scenario again," he said. "If the psychiatric commitment faces challenges, we need a backup plan." "No accidents," Charlotte said quickly, too quickly. "You promised Michael. No physical harm." Michael's expression darkened. "No one's talking about harm, sweetheart. But Dad's getting older. He drives that old truck everywhere. Refuses to update to something with modern safety features. Accidents happen. Especially when brake lines wear out." Someone chuckled, and the room erupted in laughter that made me sick to my stomach. I'd heard enough. More than enough. But as I started to retreat, Charlotte suddenly stood. "I need some air," she announced. "This cigar smoke is making me nauseous." She walked directly toward the hallway where I hid. There was no time to retreat to the basement. Instead, I pressed myself against the wall, praying the shadows would conceal me. She passed within inches, and I swear she saw me. Her eyes widened fractionally, but she kept walking, opening the front door and stepping onto the porch. "5 minutes," Michael called after her. "We're almost done here." I used her distraction to slip back to the basement, my mind reeling from what I'd witnessed. My son, the boy I'd raised with my own hands, was plotting with criminals to steal everything I'd built and lock me away. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound I'd ever suffered. But I had evidence now. My phone had captured their entire conversation, their plans, their casual discussion of my potential accident. It was enough to go to the police, to the FBI, to anyone who would listen. I made it back through the workshop window and into the night, but instead of feeling relieved, I felt hollow. How had I missed this? What signs had I ignored? When had my son transformed from the earnest young man who'd worked beside me into someone who could laugh about cutting my brake lines? Back at my truck, I sat in the darkness, reviewing the recording. The quality was better than I'd hoped, every word crystal clear. Blackstone's voice talking about poetic justice. Dr. Chen discussing psychiatric commitment like it was a dinner reservation. And Michael, my Michael, orchestrating it all. But it was Charlotte's voice that stood out. Her protests weak, as they were suggested. She wasn't fully on board with their plan. She'd warned me at dinner. She'd created the distraction that let me escape the hallway. Maybe I had an ally in this nightmare. Or maybe she was playing an even deeper game. I drove home, using a circuitous route, checking constantly for tails. The house felt different when I entered, no longer the sanctuary I'd built, but a potential trap. I went room to room, looking for signs of entry, for planted evidence of the dementia they planned to document. In my office, I found what I was looking for. 3 prescription bottles I'd never seen before, hidden just obviously enough to be found by someone looking for signs of mental decline. The labels showed medications for Alzheimer's, filled at a pharmacy across town by Dr. Thomas Chen. They were already laying the groundwork. I flushed the pills and burned the bottles in my fireplace, watching the plastic melt and thinking about trust. In construction, you learn that trust is like rebar in concrete, invisible but essential to the structure's integrity. Once it's compromised, the whole thing is doomed to collapse. Tomorrow, I'd need to act. Contact lawyers, secure my assets, protect myself from my own son. But tonight, I sat in my living room staring at family photos and wondering where I'd gone wrong. The pictures showed a happy history of Michael's childhood, Charlotte's addition to our family birthdays and graduations and celebrations. Somewhere in those frozen moments, the decay had started. I just hadn't seen it. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for trusting me. We need to talk. Delete this message. See, Charlotte." I deleted the message as requested, but her words echoed in the darkness. Trust. Such a simple thing to destroy, and so impossible to rebuild. But right now, in a game where my own son wanted to lock me away and steal my life's work, I had to trust someone. The woman who'd warned me seemed like my only choice. I secured the recording in multiple locations, both digital and physical, then prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new betrayals to navigate. But Logan Mitchell had faced down corrupt city officials, union strongmen, and economic crashes. I'd survived it all through careful planning and iron determination. My son had forgotten who taught him everything he knew about business. Unfortunately for him, I'd kept a few lessons to myself. The pounding on my door at 2 a.m. woke me from a restless sleep, filled with dreams of Michael as a boy, asking why some people chose to be bad. I told him then that everyone had a choice, that good men were made by the decisions they faced. Now those words tasted like ash in my memory. I approached the door, cautiously, baseball bat in hand, a relic from Michael's high school days. Through the peephole, I saw Charlotte. But this wasn't the composed woman from dinner. Her hair hung disheveled, her makeup streaked with tears, and even in the porch light's yellow glow, I could see the dark bruise spreading across her left cheek. I yanked the door open, catching her as she practically fell inside. "My God, Charlotte, what happened?" "I'm sorry," she sobbed, clutching my arm. "I'm so sorry, Logan. I didn't know where else to go. He found out I warned you. He saw the security footage from the porch. He knew I saw you in the hallway and didn't say anything." I guided her to the kitchen, switching on lights and grabbing ice from the freezer. Up close, the bruise looked worse, purple spreading into green at the edges. My hands shook with rage as I wrapped ice in a dish towel. My son had done this. My son had hit his wife. "We need to call the police," I said, reaching for my phone. "No." She grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. "You don't understand. It's so much worse than you know. If we call the police now, they'll all disappear and they'll take you down anyway. They have judges, cops, city officials. Blackstone's network never really died when he went to prison. It just went underground and got smarter." I pulled out a chair for her, then sat across the kitchen table where Mary and I had shared 30 years of morning coffee before cancer took her. "Then tell me everything." Charlotte pressed the ice to her cheek and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had shifted. The terrified woman was still there, but underneath was steel I hadn't seen before. "I need to tell you something that might make you hate me," she began. "But if you're going to survive this, you need to know the truth. I'm not who you think I am, Logan. I mean, I'm Charlotte, and I do love your son, or at least I did. But I'm also Special Agent Charlotte Reed, FBI Financial Crimes Division." The words didn't make sense. I stared at her, at this woman who'd sat at my table for 3 years, who'd laughed at my stories and cried at our family videos. "You're FBI." She reached into her purse and pulled out a leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a badge and identification. The photo was her, but the name read, Charlotte Sarah Reed, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I was assigned to investigate Richard Blackstone's organization 3.5 years ago. She continued, her voice steadier, now professional. "We knew he was running operations from prison, but we couldn't prove it. The plan was to get close to his network, and intelligence suggested Michael was a weak link, someone on the periphery who might be turned. So you seduced my son for information." The words came out harder than I intended. Her face crumpled. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I was supposed to get close, gather intel, and get out. But Michael, when I met him, he was different. He was kind and funny, and nothing like the criminal profile we'd built. I fell in love with him, Logan. Real love. I tried to get reassigned, but my supervisor said I was too valuable in place. She pulled a small USB drive from her pocket, then another and another, placing them on the table like evidence. For 2 years, Michael stayed clean. He talked about you constantly, about how he wanted to make you proud, to build something legitimate like you had. We got married, and I let myself believe I could have both lives, the agent and the wife. What changed? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. 6 months ago, Blackstone got early release. Some technicality his lawyer found. The first thing he did was contact Michael. Not directly, but through intermediaries. He knew about the properties you'd put in Michael's name for tax purposes. He knew about your retirement accounts, your dissolved company's assets. He made Michael an offer to join his organization, promised him wealth beyond anything honest work could provide. She stood pacing my kitchen like a caged animal. I begged Michael to refuse, told him we didn't need that kind of money. But Blackstone was smart. He didn't just offer money. He offered respect, power, a seat at the table with the city's shadow leaders. For a man who'd always been known as Logan Mitchell's son, it was intoxicating to be wanted for himself. So Michael chose to become a criminal, I said flatly. It was gradual. First, just introductions to potential investors. Then, facilitating meetings. Before he knew it, he was in too deep to get out. And Blackstone, that snake, he knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to hurt you through Michael. Prison gave him 5 years to plan his revenge. Charlotte returned to her seat, wincing as she adjusted the ice on her face. I've been documenting everything. Every meeting, every transaction, every criminal act. I have recordings, photos, financial records. Enough to bring down not just Blackstone but his entire network. Then why haven't you? I demanded. Because I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between us. I looked at her, really looked, and saw what I'd missed. The slight fullness to her face, the way she'd unconsciously protected her stomach when she fell through my door. 4 months, she whispered. I found out right after Michael got involved with Blackstone. I kept telling myself I could save him, that when he learned about the baby, he'd choose family over crime. Instead, he got worse. Tonight, when he found out I'd warned you, he called me a traitor. Said I'd chosen you over him. When I told him I was trying to save him from himself, She touched her bruised cheek, and I had to close my eyes against the surge of fury. The boy I'd raised would never hit a woman. But then the boy I'd raised wouldn't plot to destroy his father either. Logan, they're planning to move against you within the week. The dinner next Sunday, they're going to drug your coffee with something that mimics stroke symptoms. Dr. Chen will be conveniently visiting when it happens. He'll declare it a medical emergency, and by the time you wake up in the hospital, you'll be under psychiatric evaluation. The drugs they'll pump into you will ensure you fail every cognitive test. I thought about the prescription bottles I'd found and burned. They're already planting evidence. I know. I tried to stop it, but Michael... She pulled out another device, this one, a small recorder. Listen to this. I got it 3 nights ago. She pressed play, and Michael's voice filled my kitchen, but slurred, and angry, probably drunk. Don't care what Dad thinks anymore. He had his time, built his empire, and lorded it over everyone. How honest he was. How he never took a bribe, never cut corners. You know what that got him? A modest retirement, while guys like Blackstone own this city. Well, it's my turn now. And if I have to put him in a home to get what I deserve, so be it. He put Mom in the ground, working himself to death for his precious integrity. At least, I'll make sure he's comfortable while his mind rots. Charlotte stopped the recording. He blames you for your wife's death. Says if you'd been less rigid about honesty, you'd have made more money and could have afforded better treatment. Mary had the best treatment money could buy, I said quietly. The cancer was just too aggressive. Michael knows that. Grief and greed make people rewrite history, Charlotte said. But Logan, there's more. 3 other elderly business owners in the city have been committed in the last year. All of them had refused Blackstone's offers to buy their properties. All of them were declared incompetent by Dr. Chen or his associates. One of them died 2 months later from complications. Walter Grant, I said, remembering Harold Martinez's frightened face in the coffee shop. He was one of them, wasn't he? She nodded. His son works for Blackstone, now managing the properties they stole. Your competition became their blueprint for destroying you. I stood my knees protesting the late hour and stress. Walking to the window, I looked out at the yard where Michael had learned to throw a baseball, where we'd built his treehouse together, where he'd stood as a young man the day he graduated from college, promising to make me proud. What do you need from me? I asked without turning around. We need to work together. My handler wants to pull me out, says I'm compromised. But I can't leave, not with you in danger, and not with... She touched her stomach. This is still Michael's child. Despite everything I want to believe, there's some part of the man I married still in there. And if there isn't, then I'll do my job, and he'll go to prison alongside Blackstone. But maybe if we're smart about this, we can save him from himself. Make him see what he's becoming before it's too late. I turned back to study her face, this woman who'd deceived me for 3 years, but was now potentially my only ally. Trust once broken is nearly impossible to rebuild. But sometimes, you have to work with the materials you have. All right, I said. We work together. But we do this my way. I've spent 35 years navigating contracts and negotiations. Blackstone thinks he knows me, thinks I'm just some rigid old contractor who got lucky. He's about to learn that in construction, you always need a backup plan for your backup plan. Charlotte managed a weak smile. What do you have in mind? First, we need somewhere safe for you to stay. Michael's already violent, and it'll get worse when he realizes you're not coming back. Second, we need to contact someone in law enforcement. We can trust, absolutely someone outside Blackstone's network. And third, we need to turn their plan against them. They want to declare me incompetent. Fine. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. I picked up my phone and scrolled through contacts until I found the one I wanted. Judge Harrison Walsh, retired, but still sharp as a tack. He'd presided over Blackstone's original trial and had been the only official I'd met who couldn't be bought or intimidated. It's 3 a.m, Charlotte pointed out. Harry's an insomniac. Has been since his wife died 5 years ago. He'll be awake. I dialed the number, and sure enough, Harry answered on the second ring. Logan, what's wrong? Nobody calls at this hour with good news. Harry, I need your help. And I need you to listen to something that's going to make you very angry about the state of our justice system. Can you meet us somewhere secure? There was a pause. Then Harry's voice came back harder. Is this about Blackstone? How did you know? Because Harold Martinez called me yesterday, terrified out of his mind. Said he'd overheard something at his psychiatric facility about you being next. I was planning to call you in the morning. I looked at Charlotte, who was staring at me with something like hope in her eyes. Maybe we weren't as alone as we'd thought. Harry, I'm going to text you an address. Bring anyone you trust, absolutely. It's time to remind Richard Blackstone why he should have stayed in prison. After ending the call, I turned back to Charlotte. You asked what changed Michael. But I think the better question is what's going to change him back. Because if there's one thing I learned raising that boy, it's that Mitchell men are stubborn as hell. He gets that from me. But we're about to find out if he also inherited my ability to recognize when he's been played for a fool. Charlotte stood swaying slightly, exhaustion and stress finally catching up. I steadied her with a gentle hand on her shoulder, careful to avoid any reminder of the violence she'd already endured. Thank you, she whispered, for believing me, for not throwing me out when I told you the truth. Family is complicated. I replied, thinking of all the ways love and betrayal could intertwine. But you're carrying my grandchild. That makes you family, no matter what else you might be. Now let's go figure out how to save my son from himself and put Richard Blackstone back where he belongs. As we prepared to leave, I noticed Charlotte had brought a suitcase. She'd known she wasn't going back. That took courage, the kind built from desperation and determination. Maybe, just maybe we had a chance. But first, we had to survive the next week. And if I knew Blackstone, he wouldn't wait quietly for his plan to unfold. The moment he realized Charlotte was gone, and I was aware of the threat, he'd accelerate everything. The game had begun, and the stakes were everything I'd built, everyone I loved, and possibly our lives. Good thing I'd always been a man who played to win. Judge Harrison Walsh lived in a modest Cape Cod on the outskirts of town, the kind of place that whispered respectability rather than shouting wealth. Even at 3:30 in the morning, Harry answered the door, fully dressed, silver hair, neatly combed, looking every inch the formidable jurist who'd sent more corrupt officials to prison than any other judge in the state's history. "Logan," he greeted me. Then his sharp eyes moved to Charlotte and her bruised face. His expression hardened. "Inside, both of you. Now." The living room felt like a sanctuary, lined with law books and framed photos of Harry's late wife Eleanor. Two other people waited there, and I recognized them both with a mix of surprise and relief. David Brennan, my attorney for the past 20 years, stood by the fireplace nursing a cup of coffee. Beside him sat a woman I knew by reputation, only Assistant U.S. Attorney Patricia Morse, known for taking down white-collar criminals with the efficiency of a surgical strike. "I hope you don't mind," Harry said, gesturing to the others. "When you mentioned Blackstone, I thought we might need reinforcements. Patricia's been investigating his early release for months. She believes it was orchestrated through judicial corruption. And David, well, I figured you'd want your lawyer present for whatever's coming." Charlotte shifted beside me, and I saw her FBI training kick in as she assessed the room. "Judge Walsh, with respect, how do we know everyone here is clean Blackstone's network?" Patricia Morse interrupted, her voice carrying the kind of authority that silenced courtrooms. "Agent Reed, isn't it? Yes, I know who you are. My office has been monitoring your reports for 2 years. We've been building a parallel case, waiting for you to gather enough evidence to move. But when you went dark last week, we got worried." Charlotte's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "You know that you're pregnant, that your cover's been blown, that Richard Blackstone is planning to destroy Logan Mitchell as revenge for his testimony 15 years ago. Yes, we know. What we didn't know was whether you'd turned or been turned. Your presence here answers that question." David set down his coffee and pulled out a legal pad, ever the prepared attorney. "Logan, before we go any further, I need to know everything. Attorney-client privilege extends to everyone in this room under the common interest doctrine, but I need full disclosure to protect you." For the next hour, Charlotte and I laid out everything. The dinner, warning the recorded meeting, the psychiatric commitment plot, the planted medication, the violence when Michael discovered Charlotte's betrayal. Harry's face grew darker with each revelation, while Patricia took notes with the focused intensity of a prosecutor building a case. When we finished, silence filled the room until Harry finally spoke. 3 other businessmen, Walter Grant, Joseph Hillcrest, and Marcus Chen, all committed within the last year, all had their assets transferred to family members who suddenly became very cooperative with Blackstone's organization. "Marcus Chen," I asked. "Any relation to Dr. Thomas Chen?" His uncle, Patricia, confirmed. "The good doctor apparently has no problem destroying his own family for profit." Walter Grant died 2 months after commitment. Official cause was complications from dementia, but the family was denied an independent autopsy. "So we're dealing with murder," David said flatly. "Or at least wrongful death through gross negligence." Charlotte pulled out her collection of USB drives. "Everything's on here. Financial records, recorded conversations, photos of documents, even email exchanges between Michael and Blackstone's lieutenants. I've got 3 years of evidence, including proof that Judge Martin Kelway took bribes to arrange Blackstone's early release." Patricia's eyes lit up with prosecutorial hunger. "That's what we've been missing. Kelway's been careful, but If you have documentation, I have his bank records showing deposits that match exactly with withdrawals from Blackstone's shell companies, Charlotte confirmed. The FBI trained me well. Harry stood and walked to his window looking out at the darkness beyond. The question is, how to use this information to save Logan and possibly salvage Michael before he's too far gone. With respect, Judge, I said, my son hit his pregnant wife and is planning to lock me in a psychiatric facility while he steals everything I've built. I'm not sure there's anything left to salvage. You'd be surprised. Harry turned back to face us. I've seen men do terrible things when they're caught up in something bigger than themselves. The question is whether Michael's acting from greed or if he's been manipulated into believing this is somehow justice for his mother's death. Charlotte spoke up, her voice soft, but determined. There's something else. Something I haven't told anyone, not even my handler. 3 months ago, I overheard Blackstone on the phone. He was talking about Michael saying, the son will pay for the father's sins one way or another. I think Michael was always the target, Logan. Blackstone couldn't get to you directly, so he corrupted your son instead. The room fell silent as we absorbed this. My enemy hadn't just come for my money or my freedom. He'd come for my legacy, turning my own blood against me. It was a revenge more complete than any physical harm could have been. David cleared his throat. All right, we need a strategy. Logan, first things first. We need to protect your assets immediately. I can file emergency documents transferring everything to an irrevocable trust that Michael can't touch even with power of attorney. But we need to do it before regular business hours, or they might get wind of it. I know a judge who'll be awake and willing to sign emergency orders, Harry offered. Judge Catherine Murphy. She's clean and has her own reasons to hate Blackstone. He tried to bribe her during a zoning case 5 years ago. Patricia was already on her phone. I'm calling my team. We need surveillance on Blackstone and all his associates starting now. Charlotte, I'll need you to come in for a full debrief, but not officially. As far as anyone knows, you're still undercover. What about the birthday dinner trap? I asked. Do we just avoid it? No, Charlotte said firmly. If you don't show up, they'll know something's wrong. They'll accelerate their timeline or switch to the accident scenario. We need to control the situation. Harry smiled, and it was the cold smile of a judge about to pass sentence. Then we give them exactly what they want. Logan shows up to the dinner, they drug him, and he appears to have a stroke. Dr. Chen declares it a medical emergency. But what they won't know is that we'll have our own medical team standing by ready to intervene, and every moment will be recorded by federal agents. You want to use me as bait, I said. I want to catch them in the act, Harry corrected. Attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud, elder abuse. The charges will be extensive, and with Charlotte's evidence backing it up, they won't see daylight for decades. David was already drafting documents on his legal pad. We'll need to move your real assets first. Create decoys for them to steal. Empty accounts that look full, property deeds that are actually worthless. Let them think they're winning while we document every crime. There's another problem, Charlotte said. Michael's not stupid. He'll notice I'm gone. He'll call, text, probably come looking for me. If I don't respond believably, he'll know something's wrong. Then you respond, Patricia said. Go back to him. Absolutely not, I said before Charlotte could speak. He's already violent. She's pregnant. I won't have my grandchild endangered. Charlotte touched my arm. Logan's right, but I can handle this remotely. I'll text him, say I'm staying with my sister in Columbus for a few days to think things over. He knows I've done it before when we've fought. It'll buy us time. Harry returned to his seat, steepling his fingers in thought. We need to consider the nuclear option. What if Michael can be turned? What if we show him how Blackstone has manipulated him? You don't know my son, I said bitterly. When he makes up his mind. I do know your son, Charlotte interrupted. The real Michael, not this version Blackstone created. He keeps a photo of you and his mother in his wallet, Logan. He looks at it when he thinks no one's watching. There's guilt there, and where there's guilt, there's still conscience. Patricia stood gathering her notes. We have a week to prepare. Charlotte, I need those drives tonight. We'll clone them and return the originals so you can maintain cover. Harry, can you coordinate with Judge Murphy David? How quickly can you restructure Logan's assets? Give me 48 hours, David replied. I'll need signatures and notarizations, but I can make it ironclad. As the meeting broke up, Harry pulled me aside. Logan, I need you to understand something. Once we set this in motion, there's no going back. Your son will likely go to prison. Your family will be torn apart. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Michael as a boy, helping me pour foundation concrete for a new building. His face bright with pride at being included in Dad's work. Then, I thought about him, casually discussing my death with criminals, hitting his pregnant wife, selling his soul for money and power. My family's already torn apart, Harry. The only question now is whether we can save any pieces worth keeping. Charlotte appeared at my elbow, phone in hand. I've texted Michael, told him I'm at my sister's and need space. He's already responded, apologizing, begging me to come home. Says he lost his temper, but loves me. Abusers always apologize, Patricia said darkly. Until the next time. We agreed to meet again the following evening to finalize plans. David would work on the asset protection, Patricia would mobilize her federal resources, and Harry would coordinate with clean members of the judiciary. Charlotte would maintain her cover as best she could from a safe distance. As Charlotte and I drove to the safe house, Patricia had arranged a nondescript apartment across town. I found myself thinking about foundations again. In construction, when you discover structural damage, you have two choices: tear it all down and start over, or shore up what's salvageable and rebuild stronger. Do you really think Michael can be saved? I asked Charlotte as we pulled into the apartment complex. She was quiet for a long moment. I think Blackstone is a master manipulator who found your son's weakness and exploited it. The question is whether Michael's strong enough to admit he was played. Pride is a Mitchell family trait, isn't it? Among others, I admitted. Then maybe we use that pride. Show him how Blackstone has made him a fool, a puppet. No Mitchell man wants to be someone else's pawn. It was a slim hope, but hope nonetheless. As I helped Charlotte into the apartment, I made a decision. Yes, we'd protect my assets and gather evidence. Yes, we'd spring the trap at the birthday dinner. But I'd also give my son one last chance to choose the right path. The boy I'd raised was in there somewhere, buried under Blackstone's poison and his own grief-twisted ambitions. If I could reach him, remind him who he really was, maybe we could minimize the destruction. But if not, if Blackstone's corruption ran too deep, then I'd do what needed to be done. Family meant everything to me, but justice meant more. Mary would have understood that. She'd have been heartbroken, but she'd have understood. The next week would either save my son or destroy him. Either way, Richard Blackstone was going to learn that revenge was a double-edged sword, and sometimes it cuts the wielder deeper than the target. The week passed in a blur of legal documents, strategy sessions, and sleepless nights. David worked miracles with my assets, creating a labyrinth of trusts and transfers that protected my real wealth, while leaving convincing decoys for Michael and Blackstone to steal. Patricia's team had eyes on every member of Blackstone's organization, building cases that would bring down the entire network. And Charlotte maintained her cover through carefully crafted texts, each one breaking her heart a little more. Now, sitting in my truck outside Michael's house on my supposed 66th birthday, I wore a wire so sophisticated the FBI assured me it was undetectable. In my pocket was a small device that would alert the medical team waiting 2 blocks away the moment I pressed it. Remember? Patricia's voice came through the earpiece, hidden beneath my gray hair. We need them to actually administer the drug. The attempt is what we're after. Don't drink or eat anything until Dr. Chen arrives. We want him caught in the act. I climbed out of my truck, noticing the black Suburban parked across the street. They weren't even trying to hide anymore. Good. Overconfidence would be their downfall. Michael answered the door with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Dad, happy birthday." "Come in, come in." Charlotte's sorry she couldn't make it, but her sister really needed her. "I understand," I said, playing my part. "Sometimes family has to come first." The irony of my words wasn't lost on either of us. He guided me to the living room, where a small gathering waited. My daughter Jennifer and her family, a few neighbors for show, and of course, Dr. Thomas Chen, who jumped up to shake my hand with excessive enthusiasm. "Logan, happy birthday. You're looking well. How's the ticker?" "Can't complain," I replied, noting how his fingers went to my wrist, checking my pulse under the guise of a handshake, establishing a baseline for whatever they planned to do later. The party proceeded with forced normalcy. Jennifer, bless her, had no idea what was happening. She chatted about her kids' school activities, while Michael hovered, refilling drinks I didn't touch and offering food. I politely declined, claiming I'd had a large lunch. "Dad's not eating much," Michael observed to Dr. Chen, loud enough for others to hear. "He hasn't had much appetite lately, has he, Jen?" Jennifer looked puzzled. "What? No, Dad seems fine to me." "You haven't noticed the weight loss?" The confusion. "Just last week he called me by Uncle Robert's name." "I did no such thing," I protested, playing into their narrative. Let them think I was defensive about my mental state. Dr. Chen nodded sagely. "It's common for family members to deny early signs. The mind is protective that way." Tyler and Sophia ran over to show me their drawings, and I made sure to fumble with my reading glasses, squinting at the pictures longer than necessary. Michael and Chen exchanged meaningful looks. "Coffee, Dad," Michael offered as the party moved toward cake time. "I made your favorite, that Brazilian blend you like." "That sounds perfect," I said, watching him disappear into the kitchen. Through my earpiece, I heard Patricia coordinating. The medical team was in position. Federal agents had the house surrounded. All we needed was for them to make their move. Michael returned with a steaming mug, and I saw Dr. Chen give an almost imperceptible nod. This was it. The coffee that would simulate stroke symptoms and begin my journey to a psychiatric ward. "Before we have cake," Michael announced, "I wanted to say something. Dad, you've been my hero my whole life. Everything I am, I owe to you." The words might have touched me if I hadn't known what came next. I raised the mug to my lips, then paused. "That's kind of you to say, son." "I mean it," he continued, and for just a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes. Doubt, regret. "You taught me that a man's word is his bond, that integrity matters more than profit. Lessons you seem to have forgotten," I said quietly, so only he could hear. His face went white. "What?" I set the mug down untouched. "I know about Blackstone, Michael. I know about the plan. I know about all of it." The room froze. Dr. Chen started to stand, but I waved him back down. "Sit, doctor. Unless you'd like to explain to everyone here about the 3 elderly men you've had committed in the last year. Walter Grant's family would especially like to hear about his complications." "Dad," Jennifer said, confusion clear in her voice. "What's going on?" Michael's mask finally slipped completely. How did I find out? Or how did I protect myself? Because if you're asking about my assets, you should know that everything was transferred to protected trusts 5 days ago. Those documents you have with my forged signature worthless. The accounts you plan to drain empty already. The properties you wanted to steal no longer in play. "You son of a—" Dr. Chen started forward, but Michael grabbed his arm. "He's wearing a wire," Michael said flatly. "Aren't you, Dad? This whole thing is a setup." "Just like your birthday gift for me was supposed to be," I replied. "Tell me what's in the coffee. Something to make me appear mentally incompetent? Or were you going with the full stroke simulation?" Jennifer had gathered her children, moving them toward the door. "Michael, what is Dad talking about?" "Get out, Jen," Michael said, his voice dead. Take the kids and go, now." She looked between us, tears starting to fall. "Michael." "Go!" he roared, and she fled with the children. The neighbors made hasty excuses and departed, leaving just the four of us. Michael, Dr. Chen, me, and the weight of betrayal that filled the room like smoke. "You don't understand," Michael said, sinking into a chair. "Blackstone, he had evidence. Said you weren't as clean as you pretended. Said you'd let Mom die because you were too cheap to pay for experimental treatments." "Your mother had the best doctors in the country," I said. "The experimental treatments had a 2% success rate and would have left her in agony. She chose quality of life over quantity. We made that decision together." He showed me documents. Forgeries, just like the ones you were going to use against me. I pulled out my phone, showing him screenshots Charlotte had sent. "These are the real medical records, son. Every treatment option explored, every expense paid without question. Blackstone lied to you." Dr. Chen made a break for the door, but it opened before he reached it. Federal agents poured in, weapons drawn, badges gleaming. "Dr. Thomas Chen, you're under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, and violation of elderly rights." Patricia Morse announced, entering behind her team. "You have the right to remain silent." Michael didn't move as they cuffed the doctor. He stared at me with eyes that had gone hollow. "Charlotte warned you. At dinner last week." "She tried to warn you too," I said. "Tried to save you from yourself. Did you know she's been documenting everything for 3 years? She's FBI, Michael. Has been since the beginning." That finally broke through. "What, no? She loves me. We're having a baby." "Yes, my grandchild. Which is why she tried so hard to pull you back from this cliff you were determined to jump off." I moved closer, my voice dropping. "She does love you, son. Loved you enough to risk her career trying to save you. But you hit her. You chose Blackstone over your family." "I didn't mean to hit her," he whispered. "I was just so angry. She was ruining everything. We were going to be rich, powerful. The Mitchell name was going to mean something in the city." "The Mitchell name already meant something," I said. "It meant honest work, fair dealing, and integrity. You threw that away for a man who spent 5 years in prison, planning how to destroy us." Patricia approached carefully. "Michael Mitchell, I'm placing you under arrest. How this goes depends on what happens next. You can cooperate, help us bring down Blackstone's entire organization, or you can go down with them. Your choice." Michael looked at me, and for a moment, I saw my boy again, scared and lost. "Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He made it sound so reasonable, so justified. He said you'd stolen our future by being too rigid, too honorable. He said it was time for our family to claim what was ours. "What's ours is what we build," I said, my voice breaking. "Not what we steal. I tried to teach you that." The agents waited while Michael made his decision. Finally, he stood and held out his wrists. "I'll cooperate, tell you everything. But I need to know, is Charlotte okay? The baby." "She's safe," Patricia said, "and waiting to hear what you decide. She believes there's still good in you, Mr. Mitchell. Don't prove her wrong." As they led Michael away, he turned back one more time. "Dad, I know I don't have the right to ask, but will you look after Charlotte? And the baby?" "They're family," I said simply. "That's what we do." The house emptied, except for Patricia and me. She handed me a glass of water, which I drank gratefully. "You did well," she said. "I know that wasn't easy. Will he really cooperate?" "Charlotte seems to think so. She knows him better than anyone. And we have enough evidence to bury Blackstone either way. Your son's testimony would just be icing on a very satisfying cake." I looked around the house where I'd shared so many happy memories with my family. Now it felt tainted, poisoned by greed and betrayal. What happens now? Now we round up the rest of them. Blackstone's probably already trying to flee. He won't get far. We have teams at every airport bus station and border crossing. This time, he's going away forever." My phone buzzed. "Charlotte, I heard. Is it over?" I typed back, "The arrest part is. The healing part is just beginning." Patricia gathered her things. "We'll need you to testify, of course. But with the recordings, the evidence Charlotte gathered, and hopefully Michael's cooperation, justice will be served." As I drove home, I thought about justice and revenge, two sides of the same coin. Blackstone had sought revenge and destroyed himself. I'd sought justice and lost my son, at least temporarily. Neither path led to happiness, only to necessity. But there was hope. Michael had chosen to cooperate. Charlotte still loved him, despite everything. And somewhere in the future, a grandchild would be born who might grow up with parents who'd learned from their mistakes. The construction metaphor came back to me one final time. Sometimes you have to demolish what's rotten to build something better. It hurts to swing the hammer, but the alternative is watching everything collapse on its own terms. Tonight, I'd swung the hammer. Tomorrow, we'd start rebuilding. 3 days after the birthday trap, I sat in my living room reviewing the federal prosecutor's evidence files. The scope of Blackstone's corruption ran deeper than even I had imagined. Judges, police commissioners, city councilmen, a network of greed that had infected our city like cancer. And my son had nearly become just another tumor in that disease system. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. Michael stood on my porch, in the custody of 2 federal marshals, his expensive suit replaced by a simple button-down and jeans. The arrogance that had marked his recent months was gone, leaving behind someone who looked younger than his 35 years. "Mr. Mitchell," one of the marshals said, "your son has agreed to full cooperation. This meeting is part of his plea agreement. We'll be right outside." I nodded and stepped aside to let Michael enter. He moved cautiously, as if expecting the familiar surroundings to reject him. We sat across from each other in the living room, the same positions we'd taken years ago when I'd had to explain why his mother wasn't coming home from the hospital. "Patricia Morse says you've been helpful." I began, keeping my voice neutral. "I've told them everything," Michael said, his voice hoarse. "Every meeting, every plan, every crime. Did you know Blackstone had files on our entire family, surveillance photos of Jennifer's kids at school, Charlotte's daily routine, even records of Mom's cancer treatments? He studied us like a project looking for weak points. And he found yours." Michael flinched, but nodded. My resentment. I didn't even know I had it until he started feeding it. Little comments about how you could have done more, been less rigid, made different choices. He was so sympathetic, so understanding. Said he knew what it was like to have a father who put principles before family prosperity. "Your mother never wanted for anything," I said firmly. "Neither did you. I know that now. But grief and time can twist memories." He kept showing me other contractors who'd made fortunes by being flexible. Kept asking why my children should struggle when their grandfather could have left them empires if he'd just played the game. Michael looked up at me with haunted eyes. "I started believing it. Started resenting you for every opportunity you'd turned down, every bribe you'd refused, every shortcut you hadn't taken." I leaned back, studying this stranger who wore my son's face. "When did Charlotte try to stop you?" "From the beginning. She kept finding reasons why each deal wasn't right, why we should wait, why we didn't need Blackstone's money. I thought she was being naive." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out I was the naive one. She was trying to save me from myself while building a federal case. How's that for irony?" "She loves you," I said simply. "Despite everything, she loves you." I hit her. The words came out strangled. "I hit my pregnant wife because she tried to protect you. What kind of man does that make me?" "A man who lost his way. The question is whether you can find it again." The doorbell rang again. This time it was Charlotte, accompanied by Patricia Morse. My daughter-in-law looked tired, but determined, her FBI badge clipped to her belt in place of the wedding ring she'd always worn. "Thank you for agreeing to this, Logan," Patricia said. We felt it was important for all parties to understand the full scope of what happened before moving forward with plea agreements. Charlotte sat beside me across from Michael. The bruise on her face had faded to yellow-green, but the emotional wounds were clearly still fresh. Michael couldn't meet her eyes. "I've recommended a deal," Patricia continued. "Contingent on Michael's continued cooperation and testimony against Blackstone. 18 months minimum security, 5 years probation, and forfeiture of any assets connected to criminal enterprise." 18 months, I repeated, for trying to destroy his own father. For being manipulated by a master criminal who spent 5 years planning this revenge, Patricia corrected. Michael was a tool, not the architect. His cooperation has already led to 17 arrests. By the time we're done, it'll be 3 times that. Charlotte finally spoke, her voice steady, despite the emotion underneath. "I've been authorized to share something with you both. The FBI has been aware of Blackstone's organization for 7 years. We've had multiple agents try to penetrate it, all failures. I was the first to get inside, and only because I genuinely fell in love with my target." She turned to Michael, who finally raised his eyes to meet hers. "I was supposed to get close to you, gather intel, and move on. Instead, I married you. Had the Bureau's ethics committee breathing down my neck for 2 years. My handler wanted to pull me out dozens of times. But I stayed, because I believed in the man I married, even when he stopped believing in himself." "Why tell me this now?" Michael asked. "Because you need to understand that everyone makes choices they regret. I chose to deceive you initially. You chose to follow Blackstone. The difference is what we do next." She pulled out a folded document. "This is a separation agreement. Not a divorce, not yet. I'm giving us both time to figure out if there's anything left to save." Michael took the papers with trembling hands. "And the baby? We'll know their father, assuming he's the man I married, and not the one who hit me." Charlotte's voice hardened. "That's your choice to make." Patricia stood. "Mr. Mitchell, Logan, we need to discuss the next phase. Blackstone was arrested this morning trying to board a private jet to Montenegro. No extradition treaty, but we got him in time. His lawyer is already floating deal offers, but we're not interested. With Michael's testimony and Charlotte's evidence, he's finished." "There's something else," Michael said suddenly. "Something I didn't tell the FBI yet, because I wanted Dad to hear it first. Blackstone has a final contingency. If he goes down, he's planning to release documents suggesting Dad was involved in bid rigging 20 years ago. They're forgeries, but they're good ones." I felt my chest tighten. "The Riverside Hospital project." Michael nodded. "He knows you won that bid fairly, but he's created evidence suggesting otherwise. Emails, bank records, even sworn affidavits from people who'll say anything for money. He said if I'm going to betray him, he'll make sure the Mitchell name gets destroyed anyway." "So even now he's trying to win," I said. "Let him try," Patricia said firmly. "We'll trace every document, discredit every witness. The truth has a way of surviving lies, especially when the liar is a convicted felon with a grudge." Charlotte reached over and took my hand. "We'll fight it together. All of us. That's what family does." I looked at my son, my daughter-in-law, the federal prosecutor, who'd become our ally. This wasn't the family gathering I'd imagined, but it was the one we had. "All right," I said. "We fight. But Michael understands something. You'll serve your time however long that is. You'll make amends to everyone you hurt, starting with your wife. And you'll rebuild your life honestly, or not at all. Those are my terms for standing by you." "I understand," Michael said quietly. "Dad, I need to say something. Mom would be ashamed of what I became. But I hope, she'd be proud of Charlotte for stopping me. And proud of you for still being the man she married." We sat in silence for a moment, remembering Mary and all she'd meant to us. Then Patricia's phone buzzed, breaking the spell. "They need Michael back for more depositions," she said. "Charlotte, you're due at the Bureau in an hour for your debriefing." As everyone prepared to leave, Michael turned back at the door. "Dad, will you, will you visit me when I'm inside?" "Every week," I promised. "Just like I visited your mother. Family doesn't abandon family, even when they've lost their way." The marshals led him away, and Charlotte lingered for a moment. "He's still in there," she said. "The man I married, buried under guilt and shame, but still there." "Then help me dig him out," I said. "For the baby, if nothing else." She nodded and left, and I was alone with my thoughts. The house felt different now, lighter somehow. The secrets had been exposed, the plots revealed, the villains arrested. All that remained was the slow work of rebuilding. I picked up a photo from the mantle of Michael's college graduation. Mary stood between us, radiant, despite the cancer that would claim her 2 years later. She'd made me promise to always protect our boy, to guide him toward becoming a good man. I'd failed at that, at least partially. But Mary had also taught me that failure wasn't final, unless you stopped trying. Tomorrow, I'd meet with David to establish a fund for families victimized by elder abuse. I'd work with Patricia to ensure Blackstone's network was completely dismantled. I'd help Charlotte prepare for single motherhood, at least temporarily. And I'd visit my son in prison, reminding him week by week of who he could still become. The foundation had cracked, but it hadn't crumbled. With patience, determination, and love, we'd shore up the damage and build something stronger. It's what Mitchell men did. It's what Mary would have expected. And despite everything, I still believed in the power of redemption. After all, I'd spent my life turning raw materials into solid structures. Rebuilding a broken man couldn't be much harder than that. The phone rang. Harry Walsh checking in. As I filled him in on the day's events, I felt the first stirrings of hope. Justice was being served, truth was prevailing, and even in the wreckage of betrayal, family bonds were proving stronger than corruption. Blackstone had sought to destroy us with revenge. Instead, he'd reminded us of what truly mattered. In the end, that might be the greatest justice of all. 6 months had passed since the February day when federal agents arrested my son in his own living room. Now, on a crisp August morning, I sat in the waiting area of Fairfield Minimum Security Correctional Institution, watching other families prepare to visit their loved ones. The irony wasn't lost on me that this facility sat just 40 miles from where I'd built my first major project 37 years ago. Logan Mitchell. A guard called my name, and I followed him through security procedures that had become routine over these months. Michael had been here for 4 months now, after 2 months in county jail during trial proceedings. His cooperation had been exemplary, Patricia Morse told me. His testimony had helped convict not just Richard Blackstone, who received 40 years with no possibility of parole, but also 37 other members of his corruption network. I found Michael in the visiting room, sitting at our usual table by the window that overlooked the facility's vegetable garden, a place where inmates learned patience by growing things slowly and carefully. He looked healthier than he had during the trial, the hollow desperation replaced by something quieter, more thoughtful. "Dad," he said, standing to embrace me. The federal system allowed brief physical contact at the beginning and end of visits, and I'd come to cherish these moments. "You look good, son. How's the teaching going?" Michael's face lit up slightly. 22 inmates passed their GED last week. One of them, Marcus, he's 58 years old, cried when he got his certificate, said his kids would finally see him as more than just a convict. This was Michael's work now, as teaching financial literacy and basic education to other inmates. The man who'd almost stolen his father's fortune was teaching others how to manage money honestly. "Charlotte sends these," I said, pulling out a manila envelope. "Ultrasound pictures from yesterday, and a recording of the heartbeat." Michael's hands trembled as he took the envelope, carefully extracting the grainy images. "Is that... Can you tell..." "The head, according to Charlotte. And that blob there is an arm." I pulled out my phone. "Want to hear..." The recording was only 30 seconds long, but Michael played it 3 times. His eyes closed, listening to the rapid whoosh, whoosh, whoosh of his child's heartbeat. When he opened his eyes, they were wet. "She's having a girl," he said softly. "Charlotte called yesterday to tell me. We're having a daughter." "Mary," I said. "Charlotte wants to name her Mary after your mother." Michael had to take a moment to compose himself. "I don't deserve that. I don't deserve any of this. Charlotte visiting every week, you standing by me the baby." "Deserving isn't the point," I said. "Earning it is, and you're doing that one day at a time." We talked about the pregnancy, about Charlotte's work with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, where she now trained other undercover agents, about the legitimate business classes Michael was taking through the prison's education program. But I'd come with heavier news too, and it couldn't wait. Dr. Thomas Chen was sentenced yesterday, I told him. 15 years, no parole for 10. The families of Walter Grant and the others are filing civil suits. His medical license is gone forever. Michael nodded slowly. Good. He was supposed to be a healer. What he did to those men. I helped plan it, Dad. I sat in rooms and discussed destroying innocent people like we were planning a business merger. You were manipulated. No, Michael interrupted. Don't minimize it. Yes, Blackstone manipulated me, but I made choices. Every meeting I attended, every document I signed, every time I looked at Charlotte and lied about where I'd been. Those were my choices. This was the growth I'd been watching for months. The excuses falling away replaced by accountability. It's why Patricia Morse had recommended early release consideration after 12 months instead of the full 18. Speaking of Blackstone, I continued. He tried to make good on his threat. Released those forged documents about the Riverside Hospital bid. The FBI traced everyone back to a forgery ring in Miami. 3 more arrests, and my reputation intact. He must be furious, Michael said with grim satisfaction. All those years planning revenge, and he's the only one who got destroyed. Revenge tends to work that way, I observed. A bell chimed, signaling 10 minutes left in visiting hours. Michael glanced around the room at other families saying goodbyes. Children hugging fathers they saw once a week. Wives holding hands across tables for as long as allowed. Dad, I've been thinking about what comes next, when I get out. Charlotte and I have been talking. And we want to try. Really try. Not just for the baby, but for us. She's agreed to couples counseling, and I've already started individual therapy here. Dr. Rayburn, she's helping me understand the anger that let me justify everything. Anger at you, at Mom for dying, at myself for not being the success I thought you wanted. I only wanted you to be a good man, I said. I know that now. But somewhere along the way, I confused being good with being successful. Blackstone saw that confusion and exploited it. He paused, choosing his words carefully. When I get out, I want to work with you on that elder abuse foundation you're starting. Not for money, I'll get a regular job for that. But volunteer work helping families recognize the signs, teaching financial protection strategies. Maybe stopping another son from becoming what I became. I reached across the table and gripped his hand, rules be damned. Your mother would be proud of that. I'm proud of that. The final bell rang, and around us, families began their reluctant separations. Michael stood, and we embraced one more time. Tell Charlotte I love her, he said. Tell her I'm becoming the man she married, the man she believed I could be, even when I didn't believe it myself. Tell her yourself, I said. She'll be here Thursday. As I drove home, I thought about the strange paths justice takes. Blackstone had gotten 40 years of cage time, but he'd also given my family something inadvertently precious, as the clarity that comes from surviving betrayal. Michael had lost 1.5 years of freedom, but found his conscience. Charlotte had lost her innocence about the man she'd married, but gained a partner who now understood the value of what he'd almost thrown away. 2 weeks later, I stood in a hospital delivery room as Mary Grace Mitchell entered the world screaming and perfect. Charlotte had asked me to be there since Michael couldn't, and I held my granddaughter while she called him from the recovery room. She's beautiful, Charlotte told him over video chat. "She has your eyes." "And Mom's nose," Michael said from the prison phone room, tears streaming down his face. "God, Charlotte, I'm so sorry I'm not there." "You're earning your way back to us," she said firmly. "That matters more than anything. We'll be waiting when you get home." 4 months after that, I sat in a courtroom as Judge Catherine Murphy reviewed Michael's early release petition. Patricia Morse spoke on his behalf, citing his cooperation and genuine rehabilitation. Charlotte testified about their counseling progress and plans for the future. Even Harry Walsh provided a letter of support. "Mr. Mitchell," Judge Murphy addressed Michael directly. "You participated in a conspiracy that destroyed lives and threatened the foundation of justice in our community. However, you've also shown genuine remorse and have worked to make amends. I'm granting early release with strict conditions, 5 years probation, 2,000 hours of community service, specifically focused on elder abuse prevention, and continued cooperation with any ongoing investigations." The gavel came down, and Michael would be coming home in 30 days. That evening, Charlotte and I prepared the small apartment they'd be renting, as no mansion built on criminal enterprise, just a simple place for a family starting over. As we assembled the crib, little Mary sleeping in her carrier beside us, Charlotte asked the question I'd been expecting. "Do you really forgive him? Logan, deep down, truly forgive him?" I considered my words carefully. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a choice you make every day. Some days are easier than others. When I see him with you, with Mary working to rebuild, those are easy days. When I remember him laughing about having me committed, those are harder. But you keep choosing it. I keep choosing it, because the alternative is letting Blackstone win. He wanted to destroy our family with revenge. The only way to truly defeat him is to rebuild it with forgiveness. A month later, Michael walked out of Fairfield carrying a single bag of possessions and a folder full of educational certificates he'd earned inside. Charlotte waited with Mary in her arms, and I stood beside them as my son met his daughter properly for the first time. "Hi, baby girl," he whispered, taking her with infinite care. "I'm your daddy. I've made mistakes, but I promise you, I'm going to be better. I'm going to be the man you and Mommy deserve." Mary grabbed his finger and held on tight as if to say she'd already decided to trust him. The Elder Abuse Prevention Foundation launched 2 months later with Michael as its first volunteer coordinator. He spoke at senior centers and community meetings telling his story without flinching from the ugly parts. "I was going to destroy my own father for money and power," he'd say. "If it can happen in our family, it can happen in yours. Let me tell you the warning signs." Richard Blackstone died in prison 3 years later alone and unmourned. The news came on a Tuesday, while our family was having dinner, as Michael and Charlotte's house Mary, chattering about preschool, while their son Logan Jr. threw mashed peas with remarkable accuracy. "How do you feel?" Charlotte asked Michael quietly after I'd shared the news. "Empty," he said after a moment. "He spent so much energy on revenge, corrupted so many lives, including mine. And in the end, what did he achieve? Nothing that lasted. Nothing that mattered." "He achieved something," I corrected. "He showed us how strong our foundation really was. We bent, but we didn't break. We're still here, still family." Michael raised his glass of water as he hadn't touched alcohol since his arrest. "To surviving, to second chances, to Mom, who would have forgiven all of us faster than we forgave ourselves." We toasted, and Mary demanded to know what we were celebrating. "Family," Charlotte told her. "We're celebrating family." Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, Michael walked me to my truck. The years had aged us both, but in his eyes, I finally saw my son again, as not the corrupted version Blackstone had created, but the man who'd made mistakes and chosen to learn from them. "Dad, I need to ask you something I've wondered about for 3 years. If Charlotte hadn't warned you that night, if you'd drunk that coffee, Would you have forgiven me when you found out? I considered the question that had no easy answer. I don't know, I admitted. But I'm grateful we never had to find out. Charlotte saved us both that night, as you from becoming unredeemable, and me from losing my son forever. I love you, Dad. I love you too, son. Now go inside. Your family's waiting. As I drove home through streets, I'd helped build past the hospital, where Mary had taken her last breath, and Mary Grace had taken her first. I thought about justice and redemption. They weren't opposites, I'd learned. They were dance partners, each giving meaning to the other. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Jennifer calling to confirm Sunday dinner. Michael and Charlotte are bringing the kids. Robert's making his famous lasagna. You'll be there? Wouldn't miss it, I said. Because that's what we'd built from the ashes of betrayal, stronger than any foundation I'd ever poured in concrete. We'd built a family that chose each other every day, despite the pain of the past. Richard Blackstone had wanted to destroy us with revenge. Instead, he'd taught us the power of redemption. And if that's not justice, I don't know what is. I have one question for all of you watching. Have you ever had to choose between justice and family? How did you navigate that impossible decision? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more stories of hope and redemption. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the strongest foundations are the ones we rebuild after the storm.